Life finds the perfect counterpart to come into your experience to shake things up. Life finds the person that will push the right buttons, the person with narcissistic qualities to match your codependency. Because if you don't encounter someone who drags you through the mud, you will not stop putting yourself last. Peace, family. Welcome back to another episode of A Moment with Zen. I am Zen, and I'm so excited to have you here with me again in conscious communion, and elevation of spirit. So to kick us off today, I'm going to start with a quote that I pulled out of one of my favorite books. This book is, I call it one of the healer's Bibles. If you are a healer who works with the body, who works with the energetic field, honestly, even if you're not a healer, this book is so great in starting to cultivate awareness of how your energy is flowing, where your energy is going, how you're giving it away, how to call it back, and things of that nature. So I'm going to start with a quote from Anatomy of the Spirit by Caroline Myss. And it says, when you don't trust yourself, everything and everyone around you feels temporarily fragile because that is how you feel within yourself. When you don't trust yourself, everything and everyone around you feels temporarily fragile because that is how you feel within yourself. When I reread that quote, because I read that book about 3 times, when I reread the quote, it brought me into present day, just things that I'm working through in my own journey, in my own experience, and trust is a huge one. I've just went through such a major shift in 2023 with my relationships, with the people around me, and this is something that has honestly never happened in my experience to where, y'all, I was losing people left and right. And when I say losing people, it really was spirit being like, hey, this person's time is up in your life, you need to release them. Spirit revealing things to me about different people that were in my life, and nothing that was malicious necessarily, but that year, 2023, being so transitional for me, I received so many messages that were like, hey, on this path forward, these certain people can't come with you. And I'm someone who has always had, I'll say, hordes of friends. I'm so accustomed to having so many people around me. And so as those things were happening inside of my experience, I started to ask, who can I trust? And I started to experience just different betrayals left and right, things that I will categorize as a betrayal, right? Or rather as a spiritual betrayal. I started to experience these things left and right, and it really did leave me to question, who can I trust inside of my experience? Now, as I was going through it, I was so in the middle of it that I wasn't in enough of self-awareness. I was in the middle of the fire, looking around me and asking, what the is going on? Like, why are so many people doing this or that? Why am I noticing all of these things? What is going on? And I'm not gonna lie, because of the speed of which things were happening, because it just felt like I was being hit by a freight train weekly, daily. I was so deep in victim consciousness that I really was in the mindset of things are happening to me. And energetically, I started to fight, knowing that that's not the way to handle things in spirit, right? I started to put up these different barriers and feelings that I had to defend myself. And honestly, as new people tried to enter my life in that time, I could feel that my defenses were up. And y'all, the thoughts that were going on in my mind were really interesting. But on the tail end of it, as it started to cool down, and on the tail end of it, as it started to cool down, as the people who needed to be released were released, and all I was left with was with myself, what I found was, and y'all know this was it from the beginning, it's always us. It's always us. Granted, yes, there were things that were happening in my relationships that I no longer needed to tolerate. There were boundaries that I had never set that needed to be set. And so since I never set them, now it's to a point where, okay, this person just can't come forward with you. But at the tail end of it, it came down to now it's just you. And you need to look at why is it that there was so much mistrust showing up inside of your own experience? Why is it that the illusion of betrayal was popping up left and right? And a couple of different things happened at this time. This is when I got really deep into my own shadow work. This is where I became better acquainted with my shadow self. It was through having to experience what I experienced and then having to get to the utmost of fed upness that I finally asked, what is it about me? What am I doing? And Spirit was like, ha ha, voila, you don't trust yourself. Ha ha, here it is. Like, I've been trying to show you the entire time. I've been telling you the whole time. You don't trust yourself. Ha! And all of these qualities that these people possess, like, granted, yes, you did have to let those people go. Those things, that's valid. But all of these qualities that they possess, I've been trying to show you that this is a way that you treat yourself. These are qualities that you possess. This is your selfishness that you're seeing. This is your lack of trust that you're seeing. And so in that, in alignment with that quote, I was made to see how fragile my world was, and in essence, how fragile I was. And this was really as I started to go deeper into my shadow self, I started to really hear my ego and really meet my ego. And let me tell y'all, she got some issues, okay? She is not okay a lot of the time. Rightfully so. We working on her. But once I really started to hear her, I was like, okay. But it wasn't until I finally asked that question, what am I doing? What is it about me that's been attracting these things? I started to hear her fragility. I started to see how she was hiding behind certain things, hiding behind just certain actions and illusions and, so many different things I can name, but we'll just leave it there. But in that, when I really just got down to the meat of it, it was, I don't trust myself enough. And so until I trust myself, I will not be able to attract the relationships that I desire in a way that allows for trust to freely flow inside of the dynamic. And so I want to talk a bit about the fragility piece of it and how when you have a lack of self-trust, the world around you feels insecure. It feels like you don't have anything to stand on. It feels like there's no solid ground. But it has a way of projecting outward, right? It has a way of showing up as financial insecurity, relationship insecurity. It has a way of showing up as you're perceiving the people around you doing certain things that are untrustworthy, but our world and life has a way of being just the utmost beautiful and profound mirror. And even as I'm just sitting here thinking about my own experiences, and thinking about people that I've worked with, I see the mirror so loud and clear. There is not one moment that life is not speaking to you about you, that it's not showing you you. And people sometimes get a little lost in this. Sometimes they may get a little misconstrued because you'll see something like this past week, I posted about the shadow side of liars, cheaters, things of that nature, and what that could mean with people who say, I hate cheaters, for instance. This is a mirror, right? The mirror isn't necessarily saying you are a cheater. The mirror could be showing you where you look at the qualities of someone who cheats. And so this becomes very personal according to a person's experience. But if we were to generalize this, someone who cheats in life does not put other people first. They put themselves first, to a point where it becomes an overinflation of ego, right? Because in essence, when we're secure in life, then there's nothing above or below, but we are a part of life. We flow with life, with people, rather. So someone who cheats puts themselves first. And so a person who says, I hate cheaters, one, perhaps you've been cheated on, okay, and you're scarred. But we're going to replace the word hate with resent, because most of the time it's resentment. Resentment is an emotion that's very closely tied to jealousy. And resentment says, you got to do that and I didn't, so I feel a type of way about that. Not to say you got to cheat and I did not, but resentment says, how dare you? Because this is how I am. How dare you not fall in line with this, in a way. And what I often find is people who are carrying resentment over, I'll say like a betrayal of that sort, they themselves might be recovering people pleasers and not know it. And so you, the person who tends to put other people first, builds up a quote unquote hatred or resentment for a person who does not put other people first. If we can break it down that way, there's a part of you that might resent yourself for not putting yourself first. And so that's where the mirror is. So we don't always want to look at the mirror as a literal thing, but a great thing to ask in that case, and just taking it back to that trust, taking it back into those moments where I felt betrayed. A great way to look in the mirror is to say, how did this make me feel about myself? Not how did this make me feel just about the world around me, but you dig into it when you ask yourself, how does this make me feel about myself? And now, where did this feeling come from? Because when things happen, when a feeling is triggered, for instance, in my situation, when mistrust was triggered, the first time I experienced mistrust wasn't with the people in my experience who on a spiritual level decided to show up in my experience that way so that they could help propel me to my next level. That wasn't the first time I experienced mistrust. It happened before that, and it happened before that, and it happened before that. You know, those feelings were already inside of me, but things will happen in your experience. The mirror will come in your face in order to dig them up so that you can really see it. And so now you can see yourself in that. I needed to see, the issue is that I don't trust myself. And so now I'm acting in a way to where I don't really know who to allow in my life. I don't really know who I can trust. And the words came out that way, right? But what I really mean by that is, do I trust myself enough to open myself to people again? In that, when that experience was happening, do I trust myself enough to set the proper boundaries so that whoever I let in my life, it doesn't matter what happens because I know that I'm going to show up for me. That's how it works with the projection of trust. And so I said we were talking about the fragility of it, right? About when you're in that frame of being, that state of mind, it feels like there's nothing to stand on, and it will present itself in different ways inside of your experience. But in this, I invite you to start to look at the different parts of your experience that feel fragile. Look at your relationships. Look at you can look at your work. You can look at whatever. You can look at whatever aspects of your experience feel fragile, and now turn it inside. And that's where you ask yourself, Do I trust myself enough to lay a solid foundation for me in this? And you start to dig down into, if the answer is no, because often the answer is probably no, if you're there. And so now you start to go a bit deeper and you ask yourself, now, what is it that I don't trust myself with? That question right there, you're gonna get a real good and quick answer to that. Never have I asked myself, in what ways don't I trust myself, and not immediately got an answer. The ego has a way of not wanting to answer certain things honestly, of covering certain answers up. But that one right there, you can ask yourself right now, in what areas of my life don't I trust myself? You're gonna get some quick fire answers, and you go from there, and then you start to continue to just unravel that. And that's where you find the work that needs to be done. That's where you start to build those solid foundations, to where you now start to strengthen yourself in those areas. And then once you strengthen yourself in those areas, then you'll see the fruit of that in what you now start to create in your experience. You'll start to create different experiences with people. You start to create different experiences for your life. You'll really see your life start to shift. So I wanted to give y'all that about trust, about the lack of self-trust projecting outward, because that was really something that was big in my experience on the tail end of 2023. So now we're gonna go into another quote from a book that I love. This was the second book that I ever read spiritually. I read a lot of books. This is the second spiritual book that I ever read. There's a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And the quote says, "Your task is to learn the lesson that the teacher has for you rather than to resent the teacher." Your task is to learn the lesson that the teacher has for you rather than to resent the teacher. Now, what does he mean by that? So there are so many different ways that we can look at that, right? But in today's context, I feel called to look at that as life itself being the teacher, which it is. Life, we can look at life as an incubator for your spiritual growth. And people often say that life is a school. In a way it is, but at the core of you, at the depth of you, at your true essence, you know everything that there is to know, because you are a spark of the Creator. You and the Creator are one. There's nothing that our Creator doesn't know. And so you know everything that you need to know, but you've come into this life, quote unquote, school of sorts. You've come into this incubator in order to remember who it is that you are. And so it appears that life is giving you lessons, right? But, and we can take it there. It appears that life is giving you lessons. It's teaching you, but in a way, it's helping you remember. So looking at life as a teacher, your task is to learn the lesson that the teacher has rather than resenting it. Now, look at the way that you're handling your life and handling your life experience. There is no moment in your experience that is not laced in purpose. Even those moments where you hear the guidance, you know what you've been told to do, you know what you've been told is not for you, you decide not to listen. Even those moments aren't a waste. Those moments in themselves are laced in purpose, because truthfully, you can't move on from the lesson until you've really gotten it, until you've really gotten into your bones and it becomes a knowing. So there's no moment that's not full of purpose, but instead of really allowing life to deliver what life is trying to deliver in the most easeful way, most people, myself included in some circumstances, not as much as I used to, spend time resisting life resisting life and resenting life instead of taking a step back, creating some space, between you and what's happening in your experience, and allowing the lessons to flow through. Now, why do you do that? I feel like in one of these episodes, we probably talked about why you do that, but we're going to go through it again because I'm pretty sure that you're still doing the things. Now, why do you do that? Things show up in your life experience that you have categorized as disagreeable. What's really interesting, just as I'm allowing this to come through, thinking through this, flowing through this, I've been called over the past couple of days to think so much about judgment and to just speak to people on my platform in the comments about judgment and acceptance. In your life experience, this is based off of things that happen to you, but also what you've been taught. We've been taught that pain is undesirable. Any type of pain. We've been taught that it's undesirable and it's not a good thing. So when things come into your experience that feel painful, because you've been taught that pain is because you've been taught that pain is bad, you push pain away. Now, let's look at the way that life often teaches us lessons. Life has a very funny way of teaching us lessons through pain. But because you've created judgments about the pain, because you've created judgments about people, you've created judgments about yourself, you've created judgments about what you do want and what you don't want, life comes in and says, hey, look, I've got this amazing thing on the table for you here. This experience right here, I can give you this experience for $2. I'm gonna give you this experience. It's amazing. You know, it's gonna hurt a little bit, but it's okay. It's okay because this is the absolute best way for you to learn. This is the fastest way for you to learn. What do you think about it? I can give you this, you learn it, and at the end of it, you're gonna have $2,000. And you look at life and be like, you know, I'd rather not hurt. I'd rather not experience pain. And so life, how about I push against you instead? How about instead of accepting what you're giving me and allowing myself to seamlessly flow through what you're giving me, allowing myself to accept that maybe pain is just part of the experience sometimes, and that perhaps pain wouldn't be so bad if I didn't look at pain the way that I looked at it, that I could look at pain as something that propels me forward instead of something I don't want. Because I don't want to experience an ounce of pain, I'm gonna push against you. But you know what I'm gonna do when I do that? I'm gonna cause myself even more pain. How ironic is that? And so in this way, now you look at life and you blame life. You blame life and you resent life for the hardship. We can replace life with God if you want to, because God is everything, so God is life. But you look at life, you blame life, you resent life for the immense amount of pain that has showed up in your experience, when if you would have just took the little tap on the butt, if you would have just took the little paddle instead of running around in circles trying to deflect and avoid the paddle that was going to propel you forward, now you've attracted all of this other stuff into your experience now because you're running around like a madman. So you've attracted all these other things in your experience. Now you've got to spend time undoing all of the other pain, the unnecessary pain you've caused yourself just because you didn't want to experience the discomfort that life offers you, the discomfort that's required for growth. In that way, we come back to life is an amazing teacher, but you spend your time resisting and resenting. Let's even look at the way that people operate inside of their relationships. Y'all love to talk about relationships. This is always just an amazing example. Someone shows up in your experience. There are certain things about you that need to be brought to the surface. This is looking at this from spirit and from life's lens. Because, just going back to judgment, life isn't judging. Life / God / spirit is not judging. It's looking, observing, and co-creating with you because it sees what's required for your elevation. And so, there are certain things about you that really need to shift. But because you're a human being and you lean so heavily into things that feel comfortable, and that if you get too comfortable, you might get a bit too stagnant, and you might stay there a lot longer. You might stay there a lot longer than you need to, because life and God knows you so well, that knows that this is your nature. And so life sees these things about you that need to change. Life says, this is who we're dealing with now. If we don't push, they will not grow. If we don't cause discomfort, they will not move. So life finds the perfect counterpart to come into your experience to shake things up. Life finds the person that will push the right buttons. Life finds the person with narcissistic qualities to match your codependency. Because if you don't encounter someone who drags you through the mud, you will not stop putting yourself last. Life finds the perfect abuser for you, person who has a victim mindset. Because if nothing happens to push you to the edge, to make you finally get to the point where you decide, I no longer want to be powerless in my experience, if nothing happens, you won't move. You're gonna remain in victim consciousness your whole life. And so instead of looking at your situations as woe is me, is you adults now, look at the qualities that you possess and look at how benevolent life is, that life will always balance you out. Always, always. If you are someone who operates heavily in your feminine energy, you're going to attract a very masculine counterpart. It goes the other way. So if you are someone who is codependent, you are going to attract someone who is very selfish and who has narcissistic traits, because life does this. It's going to balance, because this is what you need in order to grow. But you don't look at it that way. And I understand it's very difficult to look at it that way when you're in it. And the question is always, why me, why me, why me, why me, why me? But life is trying to teach you, it's trying to show you, but you resent it. There are so many other ways that life brings us our compliment, right? It's not purposefully trying to drag you through the mud. It feels like a drag because you look at it like a drag. It's not purposefully trying to hurt you. It feels like hurt because you're looking at this through the lens of hurt. And honestly, understandably so, things hurt. But life is uncomfortable. And if you were someone who decided that you no longer needed a certain type of discomfort to grow, then you would grow differently. This is something that I did. This is something that I had to do. Y'all, I got so sick and tired of life teaching me my lessons in the same way. This takes coming into awareness of who you are, and I always talk about you've got to be real honest with yourself about who you are and what you do and what motivates you to move. I used to say that I'm someone who has to learn from experience, and if I don't experience it, then I don't know what to do. When I told you I got real sick and tired of being that way, because life was like, bet, I got you. And so I was experiencing painful experience after painful experience after painful experience, because something that just a great man that I know says is either life will teach you through wisdom or through suffering. And there's nothing wrong with suffering. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a path. It's a way. So I used to say, I'm someone who learns from experience. And what I meant by that is I'm someone who learns through suffering. Because simply opening my eye, like opening my third eye, and becoming more aware, listening to the experiences of others, heeding the guidance, heeding the warnings. Instead of doing that, I was like, I gotta go touch it. Fire's hot, touch it, touch it, touch it. And baby, the burning was real, okay? Every single time I touched that fire. But over time, I got really tired of learning that way. And so that came down to me, one, petitioning to the higher power, petitioning to the Most High. It was like, look, I know I've been a disobedient girl. I know that I've been very stubborn. I know that I have been playing. I've been playing with my life. I've been playing with my time. And I no longer want to learn my lessons in this way. And so the answer that I got was, are you willing to change? Are you willing to be a different person? Are you willing to look at your life differently so that you no longer have to learn through suffering, and now you can take wisdom as the thing that propels you forward? And what shifted for me in that was, one, having to learn, and again, as we talk about, as I've been saying, having to really acknowledge and accept that life is my teacher. Two, coming into acceptance that there was no way that I could avoid life's discomforts. That if I wanted to grow, I had to become okay with that. If I wanted to grow, I had to start to become very comfortable in discomfort. And in that was so much about the way that I looked at my life experience, right? Seeing that life was a teacher, noticing when discomfort was rising and leaning into it. Releasing the woe is me, oh my God, this is happening, oh, what's happening? I had to stop being so upset about things that happened in my experience, and really was like, because truly there's nothing to be upset about. The only reason that a person is upset about discomfort is because they don't want discomfort. If you decide that there's nothing wrong with discomfort, there's nothing wrong with what's happening, then you start to lean more into what life is teaching you. Now, I feel like I gotta elaborate, because some people are like, well, what if I'm in a situation what if I'm in an uncomfortable situation? That does not mean that you allow yourself to stay in the middle of pain that's being caused by yourself or by anyone else. This does not mean that you allow yourself to be harmed or to harm yourself. But this is understanding that when life becomes uncomfortable, this is the time for you to perk up your ears and listen to what's happening in your experience. Because of the way, like I said earlier, because of the way that human beings are wired, life likes to use discomfort as a way to push you to grow. So now, something becomes hurtful, painful, uncomfortable. This doesn't mean that you just sit here in the middle of it and be like, oh man, this really hurts right now. It's like you start to ask questions. What am I supposed to be learning from this? What is this showing me? What messages are being sent? What am I supposed to be receiving from this? Sometimes that answer is surrender. Sometimes the answer is move your ass. Sometimes that answer is make a different decision. This doesn't mean, and this is where we go back to acceptance and judgment. There's a difference between accepting something and tolerating it. There are things that happen in your experience, and really, when we talk about acceptance, we're talking about accepting the fact that life is the way that it is. Accepting the fact that life will life, that people will enter your life, and I like to use the analogy of the dog and the couch. You see a dog, the dog pees on your couch. You know the nature of a dog. You got to either, one, train the dog, work with the dog so the dog doesn't pee on your couch, or B, you decide you're not a dog person. You get rid of the dog because you decide that having your couch peed on isn't worth the effort of training the dog. So now, people, because a dog is going to do what a dog is going to do. So either you're going to set the boundaries, you're going to work with the dog, or you're going to release the dog. Now, people will come and piss on your couch. That is what they will do. Why will they do that? Because people are freaking traumatized. That's what traumatized people do. So you've got two options. These are the options that life gives you. Either you can you can work with these people. When I say train, we don't, we kind of do train humans, but, but you can work with the people. You can set boundaries. You can put forth energetic effort. You can put the emotional labor. You can decide to do that. You can see what outcome you get from that. Or B, you can decide that having your couch peed on is not worth the effort, and you decide to release it. Those are the two options that life gives you. But you find a third option, you find another option. What do? You say, I can complain, I can be mad, I can get angry. And you can do that, but that's an option you gave yourself. That's not what life, those aren't the easeful options that life gave you. That's what happens when you decided that you don't like what's happening, and now you're going to resist and fight against life instead of taking the options that life gave you. Work with it, release it. Work with it, release it. That's it. So now we had 1, you recognize that life is your teacher. 2, you lean into the discomfort of life. You start to allow the changes to flow, understanding that change is discomfort, understanding that change is uncomfortable. You start to allow the changes to flow, understanding that change is uncomfortable. And now 3, you start to lean into acceptance and non-judgment. And as I said, acceptance is not tolerance. Acceptance is saying, I recognize life is my teacher. I recognize that life gets uncomfortable and I can lean in. And I also recognize that there are certain things about this that I can't change. And so instead of fixating my energy on what I don't like, which is the judgment piece, instead of fixating my energy on what I don't like, I can look at what's around me and decide what I will give my energy to, what I will spend my energy on. And I will decide to spend my energy on outcomes that are favorable to me, outcomes that feel good, outcomes that are full of love. And again, you've got 2 ways of achieving those outcomes. You work with the stuff that you're given. You work with your life. You work with the people that are in your experience. Or B, you release it. You work with it or you release it. One of the options was not that I sit and judge it. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of space. What good does it do you? To say, I really don't like this and I'm going to spend so much time paying attention to the fact that I don't like this. Doesn't that sound just insane? It sounds absolutely wild. And so in leaning into those things, this is where you really start to be able to see life for what it is. You look at your experience in hindsight. Look at the facts of your experience. Something that I've encountered when in sessions, when asking people questions just about their life experiences, specifically about the way that their life experiences have dictated the way that they feel about themselves and the emotions that are present. What I find is people use terms like never. I have never experienced what love feels like. No one ever XYZ, using the nevers and the evers. And 10 times out of 10, when I start to ask them questions, we can pinpoint a time where that is not true, where they actually have received love, where people actually have shown up for them, But you spend so much time judging and so much time wanting it to be one way that you can't see the light that's being presented to you. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so you start to reframe the voices in your mind that say never and ever, because it's not true. You start to decide to look at life from a lens of, you know what? Perhaps I have been disappointed 9 times, but there was this one time where I was not. There was this one time where I wasn't. And that's the outcome that I desire. So that is what I'm going to fixate my energy on instead of these 9 times. What do people say? Fall down 9 times, get back up 10. That's what it is here. Focus on what truths what desirable truths can I focus my energy on? It might be a fact that you were disappointed. It probably is. I don't know one person who has not been disappointed. People are disappointing. Life is very disappointing. That is factual. Life will disappoint you because you have ideas about the way it should be. So the moment that you decide that you are going to be open to what life gives you, you will feel much less disappointed. But I will tell you that these imperfect humans who are very traumatized, they're going to show up in your experience and they're going to disappoint you. And if you decide that disappointment is what you're going to see, disappointment is what you will receive. But if you can open yourself up to seeing the ways that life actually is giving you love, love might not even be showing up in the way that you desire, but love is there. You might want love from Jaquan, but Ray Ray is over here loving you up and down, but you don't want to look at that because it's not the love that you desire, and it's okay, but it's love. It might not be the love that you desire, but it's love nonetheless. And so the more you lean into the desirable truths of your experience, when I say the desirable truths, it doesn't mean that you don't pay attention to the other things that are happening. This doesn't mean that you're not real about your experience. But again, this is in lieu of creating the life that you desire. It just benefits you way more to affirm, I have a life that's full of love. You got 2 people that love you, you've got a life that's full of love. Say it. Instead of saying, nobody loves me and nobody calls me, you got one person that calls you, you know what, this person calls me, I would love for more people to do it. Start to affirm, confirm, put it out there, the things that you actually want in your experience, instead of looking at life as this big monster that's against you, that's doing things to you, that's not here for you. Life is in your corner, but it's up to you. It's up to you to decide what aspects of life will you give more of your attention to. There are plenty of sides of life that are absolutely shitty. Look at the state of our world. Yes, it is. Yes, do something about what you're called to do something about, but on the other end for you, focus your attention on the parts of life that are absolutely beautiful, and I promise you, you're going to see more beauty into your experience. And so now, lastly, I want to give you all one more quote from Anatomy of the Spirit by Caroline Myss, and then we're going to do our oracle. And then y'all are going to have received everything that you have needed to receive from me today. So, the last quote. Again and again, the sacred texts tell us that our life's purpose is to understand and develop the power of our spirit. Again and again, the sacred texts tell us that our life's purpose is to understand and develop the power of our spirit. And so in that, just bringing it all together with the trust of self that we discussed in the beginning, and then going into trusting life, trusting life to show up for you, but you having to show up for yourself. In all of that, your role in this, your role in shifting your perspective around the way that you look at your life, shifting your perspective around the way that you look at yourself, ceasing to look at life as the enemy, is to understand that what life is doing, what life is trying to do, if you let it, and if you create space for less resistance, is to empower your spirit. When you leave your body, the next phase of the journey commences. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to escape to. Everything is happening right here, right now, in this moment. If you allow life to, it's going to take you on this fantabulous journey. So now you've gained all the things that you needed from this experience. You're going to take them into your next. The soul becomes empowered. You come back. Some of y'all say y'all not coming back to earth, but yes, you are. You come back and now you're even more empowered and your next experience is even more amazing than this one. So I pray that y'all took what you need to take from that. And now let's see what guidance the oracles have for the collective. So the first card that we have is abundance. I love it. I love whenever this card is pulled. It's for the collective. I'm part of the collective. This card is always for me. Your destiny is already written. You just have to tap into your inner strength to reach it. So on par. Destiny, hidden power believed to control what will happen in the future or fate. Everyone is born with a destiny. You may be living in it or may be buried in a deep place and almost forgotten. In many ways, we have forgotten our path and our purpose. On your journey, you may meet others with similar stories to yours and unique perspectives based on their experiences. To reach your destiny, remain humble. Learn what you must, little by little, but never forget it. Ori, send me signs, visions, and people to assist me in reaching my destiny with grace and humility. And now, our second card, patience. Also on par, because have grace with yourself. Be patient on the path. You don't need to do everything at once. Intention is created in darkness, but it doesn't have to stay there. Consider a baby in a womb. They are in darkness, yet they are growing. Imagine that you are in a womb, the womb of life. You will grow, things may change, not go as you plan. The oracle was listening, y'all. Or not even go your way, but an intention is still being created. That intention may be a project, a vision, a relationship, or something else precious. Although the darker times may be hard, continue to nurture your intention and help bring it to light. Ori, please help me to endure in moments of darkness. May I not fear the darkness, but have patience as I grow into the best version of my higher self. And there it go. Y'all see the cards was picked blinds, okay? Spirit be knowing. All right. And so that is that on that for today. Thank you all so much for joining me again. As always, I am just steeped in gratitude. And I pray that every word reached the hearts, the ears, the minds, the souls, all the things that needed to be reached. And I will see you all next time. Amen. Ashe. Namaste.